there was a great deal made of the fact that in around Mother's Day of 1975, you finally found your natural mother.
Yes.
And there was one psychiatrist in particular who would later say that this is what put Berkowitz over the edge. He was so filled with rage because he had met his natural mother and she was a disappointment, etc., etc. Would you respond to that?
Yeah, I did find my natural mother. It was something that I just had in my heart to do. I had come across some literature from the Adoptees' Liberty movement, and this was back in early 75 or somewhere around 74. And I just suddenly had this urge to go see if I can possibly find my natural parents, because I was always curious. It was always like a driving thing. And to make a long story short, I did meet, as you said, it was in 75. I even lost track of the time. I did meet my natural mother, and she turned out to be a very nice person. We got along really good, typical Jewish mother. And I found out I had a half-sister, and we really kind of hit it off pretty good. I started to go over to their house all the time. I was out in where my sister lived in Queens. She's long since moved away. My mom lived out in Brooklyn just briefly, and then moved to Long Island, to Atlantic, Long Beach. And I was over there at her house a number of times. We had a fine relationship, and she used to cook meals, and it was totally false that I had any rage or animosity towards her. I feel that at that time with that psychologist, he was mainly, and this is not a criticism, but look, just looking back, he was mainly interested in fitting me into these different molds that he already had. As a Freudian psychologist, he had these certain molds you have to go into. It always reverts back to the childhood, the mother, a bad relationship. But that was completely false.
Which brings something to mind. Somebody, not you, told me a long time ago that you had actually read a book called The Murdering Mind to be familiar with some of the psychology of this kind of stuff so that you could give the right answers to shrinks.
Yeah, that's true, yeah.
It's true.
Yeah.
So are you saying you were just parroting back to them what you thought they wanted to hear?
Yeah. But there was a whole reason for that too. It's such a long story. It was that McGraw-Hill thing with Mr. Klausner and all the stuff that resulted from that. I had felt really betrayed by the attorneys, and then when I found out that the attorneys that represented me were working out a deal to write a book with this guy, and eventually a book was published by McGraw-Hill, which I think it didn't do well. It kind of bombed. But anyway, at that time when I found out that was coming out, I contacted Mr. Abrahamson, Dr. Abrahamson, and kind of pretty much told him what he wanted to hear, And
I found out from my dad, when I saw the original birth certificate that had been blocked by the courts, my dad had original in his vault, my adoptive father, and he gave it to me. And I saw the name of my father, Anthony Falco, Tony Falco, and I says, hey, wait a minute.
That's Italian.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. So I was very curious, and my dad finally told me, my adoptive father, Nat, he's living now in Florida. We spoke over the phone, and he told me the real story. He says, okay, well, here's the story. Dave, your mom didn't die while giving birth to you. You were born out of wedlock, and the father, I guess, didn't want to keep you, so they put you up for adoption, which was normal back then. And so we got word that a family in Brooklyn, a woman in Brooklyn wanted to put up a child for adoption, and they made the connection, and eventually that worked out, and they took me home. But I found out that I was very confused about that name, so I began to search through all the Brooklyn phone books for Falcos, calling one Falco after another, and there's like 100 of them, and nobody knew anything. But later on, when I did find my birth mother, we had a wonderful reunion. It was really beautiful, but beautiful. At this time, about 22, and she told me the story, that her boyfriend's name was Joe, just Joe, and it was not Tony Falco. That was she was married to him, and They owned a fish store in Brooklyn, in Williamsburg section of Brooklyn. Little Falco's Fish Market. Was it in the late
Remember
night?
Fish Market?
Remember it? Yes,
You
that's
do?
what I'm saying. Yes,
There was a Falco's Fish Market.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, there was.
What year was that?
Oh gosh, it had to be in the late 50s. 60s.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Well, that's
That's
unusual.
his birth mother's
Yeah.
fish market.
yeah.
That was Tony's fish market, but he ran off with another woman, leaving her stranded. So she had to fend for herself, raising a daughter. I have a half sister. That was Tony brought into the world with my mom, Betty, and so they eventually Betty had a relationship with this man Joe, and then that's where I came from. She had a long-term relationship with him. He took care of her. He owned some property. He had a family of his own, and so that's how it basically came about. Yeah.
And this all just really played very heavy on your mind here.
Well, I was very happy to find my birth family. We had a wonderful, great. I had a sister I never knew, and I mean, she was so sweet and wonderful. And my mom was so nice. She explained the whole story to me. Nice Jewish lady, she could really cook, and she was a homemaker, and we hit it off.
During your childhood, what was it that made you happy? What did you enjoy?
Well, running around with my friends, riding my bicycle. My bicycle was one of my favorites, and I played all kinds of sports. I was very active. The little league. We played stickball in the Bronx. We played scully in the street. We played handball. Did everything, because I was very active, and I rode my bicycle all over the place. So that was a lot of the joys. And my adopted father, Nat, he took me to baseball games in Yankee Stadium. We went once in a while. He had to work a lot, so we didn't get to do that too often. But I was really in many ways a typical kid in the Bronx. I just had issues within myself that were causing me a lot of self-harm.
I think what's eye-opening about David's story, sometimes he's painted in the media as being this loner. The reality is he was a part of an Appalachian mountain club where they climb mountains, not far from here, the Gunks. He's part of baseball teams. He was part of a volunteer fireman club in the Bronx. So he's very socialized. We think isolation means the loner in the corner, hiding. In his case,
That's how it was painted. I remember reading about it.
the reality is he was very socialized.
What made you go into the military?
Again, I finished a public school, and then went to junior high school, and then went on to high school, and my life, I got along with everyone pretty good, but it was a time of transition. My mom was really the staple of my life, because she was always there for me. My mom, Earl, was a homemaker. And so when she passed away, I was 14. She got cancer, and they gave her 6 months to live, but she only lived about 3.5 months after the diagnosis.
She died.
Yeah, she died. And so it was just my dad and I, and the neighborhood, it was so much going on, even just outside myself, the whole neighborhood began to change at that time. The traditional working class people that lived in that neighborhood, we got to move away. There was a lot of crime. They were on the roof of our building. The heroin addicts were gathering up there. You'd hear them walking around at night. This was on Stratford Avenue in the Bronx. And this was back in the 60s, actually. So the mid-60s, the later 60s. And so we had to move. We moved to Co-op City, which is a new housing development that had opened up. And so we left Soundview, and all my friends that I grew up with, everyone was moving. Every day you'd see moving trucks, a couple of moving trucks on that street, because people were moving out so fast. It was the whole neighborhood was turning around, and there was a lot of crime in the building. There was beer bottles in the building, and people hanging out. It got real bad. So anyway,
David, I'll tell you how bad it was too. In my former life, guys were in trouble, they'd take care of it and just leave them in the Bronx. They had a street. That's what that. They're too young to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
No, I used to. Now, one of the things that saved me is I love to ride my bike. I mean, I literally rode my bike every which way you can imagine, sometimes for hours at a time. After my mom passed away, I would just get up in the mornings on the weekend when I didn't have to go to school. At 7 a.m., I would pedal my bike until well after 6 o'clock at night, coming home when my dad was coming home and things like that. I rode everywhere. I had through the projects, to every neighborhood you could think of, all the way up to Pelham Bay, City Island. I rode my bike all the way up to Westchester County. And yeah, that was
He rode his bike to Cos Cob
yeah,
from the Bronx.
yeah.
28 miles, 30 miles.
Yeah, I used to go all the way up to White Plains, New Rochelle, north of that to Armonk, and some places I just exploring. I just had this energy. I was this ball of energy. I was at a level of hyperactivity. I can't explain it. And now my other friends, we used to ride our bikes together at times, but they couldn't go past a certain point in the neighborhood, like a two block radius either way. That was the limit. They don't go past that. But I was the adventurous one. I had to just keep going, and so. But that was good. That was good for me. And my dad got me a nice little 3-speed bicycle, and so I felt like king of the road. And but again, things began to change. Well, anyway, when I moved to Co-op City, I found a whole new set of friends and started a new life. And it was just me and my dad. And, I was going to high school then. And I was not a good student. I was truant a lot. I couldn't sit, again, hyperactivity. I couldn't focus or concentrate. So I did manage to graduate. But even months before that, I already made up my mind that I was going to go into the Army. I had friends in Co-op City. We became really close. One of them, his dad was a New York City firefighter who died in the line of duty, Ed Snedeker. And this is before I met Ed. And so I always had an interest in the firehouse because there used to be a firehouse in Soundview that I used to go to sometimes. And, the firemen were friendly there. And then I also became a Missouri police officer. And when I was 17, they had a thing. We had a rescue truck. They allowed us to join, me and the guys from the neighborhood. And so we really did a lot of positive things. Back then, they had the hippie era where a lot of kids were smoking dope and things like that. I was like pretty much straight-laced. I was a conservative guy, And so I did that. A lot of experiences. But when it came to school, and I was getting, in my final year in the 12th grade, the question is, what am I going to do with my future? And I couldn't see myself going on to college or anything like that. I hated school, absolutely hated it. And so I said, well, the military would be a good place to go. And so I did. I chose the Army. I was very patriotic. Vietnam was going on at the time. And so I went over to the recruiting station that was on Gun Hill Road or White Plains Road. I don't know if there was a recruiting station there by the subway train. And I went in there and started to talk to the recruiter about joining the Army. I still had a few months left before I finished school. And they had a program where you could sign up and join the Army, not officially, but do all the paperwork and preparations. So when you're ready when you do graduate, you can go right into the service. And that's what I did. I spoke with my dad. My dad didn't really want me to go into the military. He was in the Army during World War II. But I felt that this was good for me. I had nothing else to do with myself. So I, on the day they had the graduation in Christopher Columbus High School in the Bronx, I was on my way to Fort Dix, New Jersey, and that's where I took my basic training. And then I signed up for infantry, so I went to Fort Polk, Louisiana for infantry training. Then I went to Korea. I went to South Korea to serve in the infantry unit over there, which was an adventure. It was an adventure. But originally I wanted to go to Vietnam, but the recruiter said they're not sending troops to Vietnam right now, combat troops, because as things were winding down. This was the middle of 1971. And so it started a pullback. So he said to me, well, the best thing to do is put in to go to South Korea. And when you get there, since you'll be in Asia, it might be easier to go over there. So I did, but I ended up in South Korea. They didn't have any kind of switch over thing. So I served for a 13-month tour in South Korea. I patrolled the demilitarized zone. I was with a mechanized infantry unit. And then I got back to the States and ended up at Fort Knox, Kentucky. And from there, when I was finished my 3-year enlistment, honorably discharged, I went back to the Bronx, to start a new life. By this time, I was 21. I saved up about $5,000 from being in the Army because I lived on post, so I didn't have many expenses. And I was just ready to go back to the Bronx and start a whole new life. I had plans to, when I got back home with my dad, I looked for my friends, and really they all there was some of them were around, but everyone was preoccupied with other things. Everything had changed. I started to enroll in college under the GI Bill. I went to Bronx Community College for, right after my enlistment. I also came a security guard for IBI Security, working the night shift. So I was working and going to college at the same time. This was in 1974. And so life seemed to be looking up for me. And, if someone would have told me when I was in the services, look, Dave, when you go back to New York, you're going to have some problems. You're going to end up in prison. You're going to, mess up real bad. I would look at them like, what are you talking about? Well, I got a vision of you getting into trouble later on. I said, well, there's no way. I had good goals. I mean, I never thought this would happen. My hope in life was to, when I got out of the Army, get a job, take advantage of the GI Bill, get an education, find a girlfriend, get married, and raise a family.
You weren't on any medication or anything?
No, nothing. No.
So it wasn't even recognized, really?
I didn't
Dealing.
I didn't think I needed any help with anything. I was trying to live my life, but I was showing some signs of disturbance. That I met my birth family, had a wonderful time meeting them, and we had a good relationship. I was over there a lot to their houses in Queens, and yeah, my sister, who I found after 22 years, my birth mother. She's a wonderful lady. I found out I had a brother-in-law, I had 2 nieces, and also an extended family. It was like my life was like a whole new life was opening up, but at the same time, I had internal issues that I was dealing with. I was trying to find my way. My dad had moved to Florida. He retired. He got married. He moved to Florida. That was a wise decision for him. He needed that because he was alone too. My mom had died several years earlier, and nothing seemed to work out. I went and got an apartment, and it wasn't the best. And I got frustrated there with the neighbors, and I moved again. And I met some other people that said, wanted to find friends. I ran into some bad people that were not. They were just into some occult stuff. It sounded interesting to me. And so we used to go to Pelham Bay Park once in a while and just hang out and meet there and smoke dope. But this time I was, working. I was trying to make ends meet, and just a lot of life pressures. It was just a very vulnerable time. I was open to things. I just got a satanic Bible. I started to read that. Some other guys thought that, we should get,
Is that from this cult group?
it was a group. It was a group of people that, and so I would just say some prayers and make promises to the devil. I came under some strange teachings which talked about the end of the world, and we have to do our part to bring in the end of the world, to set up the new millennium. It was just a bunch of satanic. By this time, I was about 22, 23, yeah.
Keep in mind, 22, he's out of the Army, lonely, looking for belonging, needing companionship. And now, you run into a group of people that are offering that.
Basically sickness.
But yeah, they're found,
And there's a synergy that happens. You know it when you're in a crowd. That synergy, in psychology, they call it de-individuation, where a person loses their personal identity, kind of become immersed in the group. And now that sort of a group think, if you want to call it that, it empowers an individual. In the animal kingdom, wolves behave much more ferociously in packs than they do when they're walking in the jungle alone. It's that empowerment from the group kind of bring us to levels that we would maybe reach by ourselves.
Yeah, well, I struggled to find my place in society. I mean, I had a lot of good things going for me. I took the postal exam. I became a postal worker. Was working with a good crew of people on the midnight shift and things like that. I was thinking that when I moved to Yonkers was terrible decision to move up there. I was in the Bronx, and I moved to New Rochelle. That was a disaster. That I moved to Yonkers. The neighbors in that building, it was intolerable. I had to sleep in my car. A lot of times I wouldn't even go home. I go to Orchard Beach and park there at night to get sleep and things like that.
Believe it or not, head trauma. David did suffer a couple of blows to the head at a young age, which is, if you look at the statistics, the criminal population is 9 times more likely to have suffered a head trauma. Those head traumas, guys like Dr. Daniel Amen have shed great light on what they do to mood regulation